Oh god, I'm really making this, aren't I? This past week, we had a bunch of game presentations happen with State of Play, Summer's Games Fest, an Xbox Showcase, and the most recent presentation, a Nintendo Direct. There were some cool things announced at these presentations. Control Resonant looks pretty cool, and is pretty much the main reason why I picked up the first game. Interested to see how Platinum Games will do the last Ronin game. New Spyro is exciting, Deltarune Chapter 5 got a release date, Final Fantasy Resonance looks to be the Fire Emblem Engage for the franchise, and of course, I cannot go without mentioning the fact that the Xenoblade Trilogy is getting switched to editions, which 2 really needed, and that we are getting a new Xenoblade next year, which makes me so happy. I want to say that the Direct was overall pretty good when it was about to end, but then we got an announcement that was pretty much my worst waking nightmare come to life. The Ocarina of Time remake announcement. This remake has been subject to rumors and leaks for a few months now, and I plainly just ignore them, because I am someone who thinks that getting excited for rumors and leaks to be antithetical to waiting for the announcement to then be hype and have the hype cycle truly begin. But seeing so many people talk about it started to have me worried about it because of the fact that Ocarina of Time is one of the most popular and influential games ever made, on the same level as games like Resident Evil 4. So the idea of a remake of a game of this status was a little concerning. Also didn't help that the last remake we had was Link's Awakening, which fans are somewhat split on at launch. Trust me, I know what you are thinking. I would have made this video if it wasn't just the fact that it was just this remake that was announced, but the Xbox Showcase gave us another remake in the Persona series that I wish wasn't real. That's right, we are getting a remake of Persona 4 of all the fucking Persona games out there. Watching this trailer had me feeling nothing except for the music that was playing, because surprise surprise, Persona 4 style music is really catchy and fun to listen to. But I kept on thinking the same thing over and over again. What is the point of remaking these games? I mean, of course the main reason is money, but I have never encountered remakes that never felt so corporate before. So I want to go over some things in this short little video on how I see no point to these remakes, and they just further show me that I am done with remakes overall. The first thing, and probably the overall smallest point that goes for both Persona 4 Revival and the Ocarina of Time remake, is that the originals are really accessible to get nowadays. Ocarina of Time, ever since its release on the N64, has been ported and or remastered onto every home console Nintendo console. We've got the Ocarina of Time port on the Nintendo GameCube that came with Master Quest, we got on the Wii Virtual Console, the Wii U eShop, and the most recent version of the game was put onto the Nintendo Classic service in 2021 when they released the N64 NSO service. So we are not lacking whatsoever in ways to play Ocarina of Time. Now let's go to Persona 4, which is somehow even worse in this regard than Ocarina of Time. Now, if this was say like a decade ago, then I would somewhat see why they would make this remake, as Persona 4 was stuck on the original PS2 and that Golden was stuck on the Vita. But in 2020, Golden got ported to Steam, and then in 2023 got ported to every current day console. So we are not lacking in Persona 4 content whatsoever in terms of accessibility. So the accessibility argument is basically broken in this regard, but we still got to talk about the big one and what I personally want to see in a remake. What changes can we make to the game? Let's start with Persona 4 Revival, as this one is pretty obvious with the changes that we are getting in this game. The first change that is noticeable in this game is that we are getting new voice actors, which is a sticky tightrope for fans of the original material. Fans of the original game who want to hear the voices for the original characters given a new interpretation. Like COD Near Replicant had the old actors come in and redo some of their lines. I feel like this is one of those cases that we might need to see more voice lines for the game, as I am not opposed to having new actors trying to give these characters life, but I will say this, the new voice for Teddy is not doing it for me whatsoever compared to the other new voices we heard. The other changes that I noticed in this remake is that we are getting a third-person camera everywhere, as some areas had a fixed camera angle in the original, which is whatever to me, as the fixed camera angles from back then were probably there for performance and or loading reasons, but other than that, it just looks like Persona 4 from 2008. So what artistic reasons are there to remake this game? I mean, I would love to see them try and make real dungeons for the game, as I always found their randomly generated dungeons from the original to hinder my enjoyment of the game. But knowing how faithful Tartarus was in Persona 3 Reload has me doubting that, and less faith in this remake making changes that could improve the game for me. Now let's get on to Ocarina of Time remake. Oh joy. Now the trailer we got for the remake was just a cutscene in the game that showed Child Link sleeping, which is relatable, but that was literally it for this trailer. But that won't stop the internet from speculating. So some of the things that I have seen regarding improvements to the game are the combat, presentation, and the water dungeon. Okay, to get this out of the way, the water dungeon does not need fixing whatsoever. It is fine. It is a perfectly fine dungeon that could be better and has a bad boss fight. That is it. But regarding the other two things, apparently combat in Ocarina of Time is not good to most people, which I wouldn't say that. It's just very simple, but I never really understood why some people took issue with the combat in the game. I mean, future games definitely did more with the combat, with Twilight Princess giving you unlockable moves and the open world Zelda games giving each weapon durability and fusing mechanics, but I never saw combat as like a core pillar of the Zelda games, as it was all about the immersion and puzzles first and foremost for me. Also, I always saw the combat in Ocarina of Time as visual storytelling for Link as his own character, as even though he can be an adult, he still is a child at the end of the day and would still know the basic stuff, which got him through the first 3 dungeons he went through as a child. So what was the point of needing to know more? But that's how I personally saw it, but the biggest was definitely the presentation. Now, I will agree to an extent that the original Ocarina of Time has not aged the best in terms of the presentation, as I found the game to look unappealing even compared to other games released in that same year like Banjo-Kazooie or Spyro the Dragon. Text speed was really slow and there was no way to speed up whatsoever, which is why the owl in the game was a giant meme back in the 2000s and early 2010s, and the game didn't look all that cinematic for the most part, with them using standard camera angles. Now, regarding the cinematic aspect of the game, I would say that is mainly first 3D game syndrome, as Ocarina of Time came out around the time when 3D gaming was starting to form, so I can forgive it there, but I definitely can't forgive the text speed in this game, as even games for around then before the release of Ocarina of Time had always had the option for you to skip cutscenes or fast forward text. So having the characters take as slow as Grandma down in retirement homes of Florida is such a pace breaker. Since the games feature more dialogue than the previous Zelda games, it does matter that the game keeps up a certain pace in terms of the text box speeds. But I have a trump card because a good chunk of you already know, but one soul out there doesn't know, which is unfortunate. Nintendo already released a remake of Ocarina of Time 15 years ago. It was Ocarina of Time 3D, which was released on the Nintendo 3DS in its launch year. The game made changes and improvements to the presentation of the game that checks off nearly all of the boxes. The game looks way more appealing with updated character models and textures, as well as having the game run at 30 FPS instead of the 20 FPS of the original game. Text speed is a bit faster in this version, but you can also fast forward the text, which can improve the pacing of the game in future playthroughs if you just want to replay the game and not interact with the story. And they added some small things here and there in this remake as well, like touchscreen support to instantly store and use your items, gyroscope controls to make aiming the game be more responsive, boss challenge mode where you can refight bosses, instructional videos to help players, and even for you water temple haters, they modified the water temple and reduced the difficulty for it. The game does use the same camera angles from the original, but other than that, this is basically everything you could possibly want for a version of Ocarina of Time that is improved. So what is the point of remaking the game again on the Switch if you already have a version of the game that fixes all of these problems? People have said that porting a 3DS game to the Switch would be too hard, but I feel like we're at a point that it would be somewhat straightforward, as we have been able to port not only DS games to other platforms via the Mega Man Star Force collection, but as well as Wii U games like the Wonderful 101, though that one did take some liberties, but it's still possible. But there are also DS games that had some things changed to make them work on modern systems, like the Ace Attorney games, which were on the DS and 3DS, but work well on modern platforms. So why remake this game at all? I guess it's for the people who want to see the old format come back, but we got that in 2024 of Echoes of Wisdom, and we also have a game that recently came out this year that uses the format of the Game Boy and Game Boy Color Zelda games called Mina the Hollower. This also goes for Persona 4 Golden. We got a new Persona game in 2024. It was called Metaphor, which is basically a Persona game. But I feel like this all just stems from brand appeal more than anything, but that's just a problem with both fan bases in general. But overall, I just don't see any reason for why we would want to remake these two games that are accessible and are not making or having any real reason to really remake these games that are as good as they could possibly get. Which then leads to the possibility and reality of these remakes. These games are the same games that we can play, just with a facelift, which is the worst kind of remake if you ask me, and the remake we see all the time now, as it doesn't really remake the game part of the game, just the look of the game, when we can get the job done with our remaster that does pretty much the same thing, but in less time and less of a budget. So every time I see a remake that just looks to be the same game, but with visual changes, I just groan and or feel nothing, as there is nothing really there for it to be worth playing. Now, I don't want this video to tell you that I hate remakes overall, because I don't. I felt similar to Resident Evil 4 Remake back when that was first announced, because the idea of remaking one of the most influential games that is on every platform known to mankind was not it, Chief. But then I played it and had a fun time playing it, and they changed the story to be a bit more serious while keeping in the wit from the original, fun combat, and better level design. I also quite like the Final Fantasy VII Remake, as while they aren't perfect, I find myself intrigued by them with all the changes in the story, as well as the fact that I just find the combat in the games fun with how they turned it into an action game. But I can't lie and say that most remakes nowadays just don't seem to really excite me anymore, as they always go for the same thing of just remaking the visuals and not really changing anything worthwhile about the game, which somewhat got mainstream because the release of The Last of Us Part 1 back in 2022. Now, I could be wrong about these remakes, as we still have some time till they release, but given the fact that both Nintendo and Atlus don't really go all in on changes with their remakes, the fact that Persona 4 Revival looks pretty much the same as Golden, as well as the fact that we have the Ocarina of Time remake that we could use but don't use for some reason, means that I can't really support these remakes at the moment and have little faith that they will actually remake the game or change some things up for the different or better, which is what I think a remake should do. If I have interest in getting these games at all, which are pretty slim right now, I am getting them secondhand, which is not a perfect way to stop having these games get made. But this is the world we live in, and we are going to have to embrace it sooner or later. Hope you all enjoyed those presentations, and as always, have a nice day.